Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Wendy Sue Swanson. I'm a pediatrician. I'm a mom to two boys, and I'm the chief medical officer at SpoonfulONE, which I'll tell you all about here today. Hello, thanks for saying hello, everyone. I'm here today to really talk about how to feed your baby. And of course, you know so much about this likely already. And yet I think with new data coming out and the world being as oppressive as it is, they're good reminders. And there's particularly because new research has really changed how we talk about feeding baby solids. I want to start kind of from the beginning and give you some background on that. So I was a practicing pediatrician for 12 years. My boys are now teenagers and have kind of ridden the wave through all different kinds of prevention. I started writing a blog back for Seattle Children's Hospital back in 2009. I wrote that for 10 years, wrote like 800 blog posts and worked for NBC for a long time, translating health information for parents and families. So when I joined SpoonfulONE, it was really because I felt that food allergy protection and understanding how to feed babies needed really good translation. So hence what I'm doing today. So basics when you start from the very beginning. Number one, when after you have your baby, if you've already had your baby or you're expecting, moms will make and other partners, right, in a baby's life will make decisions on breast milk or formula. And of course, both are great for baby. I want to tell you that right from the get-go. That being said, of course, pediatricians and obstetricians and lactation consultants want to support moms who want to breastfeed. We know there are great immune benefits to breastfeeding. There's great benefits to mom's health. And, there's just kind of nothing that you can perfectly replicate from that. About 90% of moms who decide that they want to breastfeed will be able to breastfeed their babies. Now, that might not mean that you make all the milk that your baby drinks from your breast, but most people really do. Low supply is not even that big of a challenge. But that being said, some parents make a different decision and feed their babies formula. And again, both are really good choices, and you should feel great about both of them. In the context that I'm talking about today, we talk about food allergies and different food allergens, and that's what SpoonfulONE exists to create. Breastfeeding alone, unfortunately, doesn't protect against the development of food allergies. So it is kind of how you do these solid foods and how you time it and how you feel free to feed your baby those other foods on top of it. That being said, we love to support breastfeeding. Pediatricians will also, around a month of age at least, talk to you about supplementing if you're on formula or if you're on breast milk, supplementing your baby's diet with supplemental vitamin D. Most pediatricians across the United States really recommend that. Vitamin D is not very prevalent, particularly in the wintertime, because we make a lot of vitamin D in our bodies from the exposure to sunlight. If you have darker skin, if you live in a northern climate, you're even at higher risk to not have as much vitamin D in your body. So we add that into babies' diets pretty early. And then really comes the timing of like, well, okay, what's next? Your baby's on a liquid diet for likely at least 4 months of their life from the beginning. You figure out breastfeeding in the first couple of weeks to months. Lactation support can be super helpful. Support from family and friends can be helpful. It's not essentially easy for every mom and baby. In fact, my first son and I had such a hard time. I think we saw, and I'm not exaggerating, like 8 or 9 lactation consultants and had lots of challenges. And then my second baby, I had no challenges breastfeeding. But both of my babies, I did supplement my babies with formula because I couldn't make enough breast milk. And as I went back to work, I pumped at work and I supported them that way. But had to supplement them in different ways. So we did do vitamin D though as well. And then when you around 4 months of age, you really want to start supplemental feeds for lots of reasons, because your baby wants to start eating things that are not just liquid. They'll show interest in it. They'll take cues from watching you eat. They'll have smells that they get used to and that they want to eat. And in addition, we always want to get additional iron into our baby's bodies. At that point, breast milk is not sufficient for the iron needs of a baby that builds all that good muscle and hemoglobin, our red blood cells and things. So we want to start some of those different solid foods. But the big thing for you is kind of figuring out, well, when is exactly the right time? So any time between 4 to 6 months is really typical and usual for babies. But you wait for your babies to show you what we call just signs of readiness. And the signs of readiness are a combination of their behaviors and also their developmental milestones that they're meeting. So first and foremost, again, it's like baby starts to watch you eat pizza, like literally, like watches you like move a piece of pizza into your mouth. Baby starts to like like lick the air when you're eating something that smells delicious, or even drinking something that smells delicious. They start to show you that they kind of get that you have something that they don't. And then they also have to show you that they have really good head control. So at that age, around 4 months or more, babies not necessarily are perfect, but their heads are not kind of flopping all over the place. So they've got really good head control so they can keep that airway nice and protected. And then in addition, you want them to be able to kind of at their trunk level, be able to sit pretty well. So if you've got them on your lap, or you've got them in a little bumbo chair, that trunk stability is actually kind of there with babies. So it may not be that they can sit all on their own, but they can keep themselves pretty upright. And that's really important just from a safety standpoint. And then babies should show you readiness by basically, if you put something onto a spoon, so you puree a little bit of fruit, you puree a little bit of baby cereal, you basically make something almost as thin as breast milk or formula, but a little bit thicker, and you put it on a spoon and you put it towards your baby and you offer it up like this. Baby should open their mouth like they want it. Once they do, you can offer that spoon. And then if baby doesn't, what we call tongue thrust, it doesn't take all that food and just spit it all out, baby is ready to start eating some of those solid foods. So baby will show you that developmental milestones, right? That gross motor milestone, that ability to open their mouth, their psychological interest in food. And then you know it's a time. Now, it used to be way back when we had like very prescriptive advice as pediatricians of like what a best first food is. And we've really moved away from that. In fact, it's totally up to you what you want to be your baby's first food. So if you want that to be mashed up avocado, if you want that to be a cereal mixed with breast milk or formula, if you want it to be a vegetable, if you want it to be a meat puree, you can do whatever you want as the very first food if it's of the right texture. And you get to decide then kind of which foods go next. But new research has really changed the game after that first food of what you really do in the first few weeks and the first few months. And this all came about because of what we did back in the past. So back in the year 2000, when I was finishing medical school, we started saying to parents, don't eat certain foods early in life. We were scared about the development of food allergies, and we told parents to hold off on those foods. That was a mistake. In fact, food allergies continued to rise, and they continued to rise because babies weren't eating those foods early in their lives. A big groundbreaking study came out in the year 2015. So now 6 years ago, just this month, a study that evaluated babies as young as 4 months of age and as old as 11 months of age. And they followed these babies because they had severe eczema. They had broken down skin. And researchers really started to figure out that kids with broken down skin were getting introduced to food through their skin and not through their tummies. And we want kids to get introduced to food proteins through their body, through their immune system in their tummy. In fact, 70% of your immune system, believe it or not, is in your gastrointestinal tract. It's not just on your skin. It's not just in your blood. It is literally lining the inside of the tummy. And that's where your baby gets introduced to different foods so that they cannot overreact to them. So that study back in 2015, they followed babies from 4 months all the way to the time that they went off to kindergarten until they were 5 years of age. And they had them eat peanut at least 3 times a week. So it wasn't like, oh, they introduced peanut right away. They did. They introduced peanut right at 4 to 6 months, these kids that were at high risk for developing allergy. But they made sure they ate peanut 3 times a week all the way until the time that they went off to kindergarten. And what they found is that when these kids went off to kindergarten, the ones that fed on peanut at least 3 times a week were about 80% less likely to ever develop an allergy to peanut in the first place. And then another study came out a year later in the New England Journal of Medicine that evaluated babies who were breastfeeding as young as 3 months, that when moms were starting foods, they introduced 6 different common food allergens, things like sesame, fish, egg, wheat, peanut, and it was safe to introduce those, but it was really hard for moms to get all those different foods in. So your job is to say, okay, wait, I just started my baby's first food. She loved it. Then the next day, I could start a different food. Then the next day, I could start a different food. And the USDA, so the United States Dietary Association, just put out guidelines, and for the very first time is also saying at 4 to 6 months of age, make sure you're not just introducing fruits and vegetables, but you're introducing tree nuts, you're introducing peanuts, you're introducing shellfish and fish and sesame and soy and wheat and egg. Those really common allergens, we don't want to wait. We don't want to be scared of those foods. In fact, if babies are introduced them in their diet and keep them on an everyday basis in their diet early in life, we know that their immune system will just get used to those proteins and really comfortable in that diet diversity. In fact, research has also found that kids, for every additional food you eat in a day early in that infancy time in life, you downregulate the risk of developing food allergies all the way up until age 10, but also developing things like eczema or even asthma but asthma and other allergies over time. So what we know now today is that as you start these solid foods, as you start following your baby's cues and you start thinking about, oh, what am I going to do? The number one thing you don't want to do is wait. In fact, there's research that shows, for example, a study called the Child Study that was conducted in Canada. If moms waited until 12 months of age to introduce something like peanut, a child was 4 times more likely to develop an allergy to peanut. If mom waited till the baby was 1.5 years, babies were 7 times more likely to develop peanut allergy. So we know delaying food introduction is actually the risk, not the introduction itself. So, I think what can be hard for families is that people treat these foods differently. And in some ways, that's what we don't want you to do anymore. We don't want you to think about, if you're making little oatmeal, putting peanut in it is a great, peanut butter and thinning it out is a great idea. As your baby gets through 6 to 9 months, your baby will start to develop a pincer grasp. You can, bake in eggs into their food. You can do scrambled eggs and let them self-feed it. You want to share all the different foods of your culture and that your family loves to eat. So you don't have to kind of treat things as kind of off kilter. But when it comes to Spoonful One and what we're doing, we really plan to revolutionize really how babies eat everywhere in the world. Spoonful One is launching in China, in Japan, in the United Kingdom just this year. And we've launched here in the United States for a couple of years. And we're going to be in the retail environment at Target stores, for example, even this summer. So you can buy it online. You can buy it at SpoonfulOne.com. You can buy it at Amazon. What Spoonful One is it is just a mom hack or a dad hack to make it easy for you to do what we really want. Our founder, Dr. Kari Nadeau, is the head of allergy at Stanford University. She's a mom of 5, and she's a pediatric allergist, and she's got a PhD in proteins. And what she figured out was she was taking care of all these kids with food allergies. And she said, everybody's talking about peanut, but 90% of people who have allergies have an allergy to something in addition to peanut or other than peanut. So you can't actually protect against an egg allergy by eating peanut. You have to eat egg. You can't protect against a sesame allergy by eating peanut. You have to eat sesame. So she got to thinking of how could she really improve the way that baby foods and babies were eating. When you look at the baby food source in the United States, if you go to the shelves at a big store, you'll see most of it is fruits, most of it is vegetables. It doesn't have a lot of tree nuts, doesn't have a lot of peanut, doesn't have fish, doesn't have shellfish, doesn't have sesame, which is kind of the 9th most common food allergy now. So Spoonful One was designed after a year of research at Stanford, where Dr. Nadeau studied babies as young as 2 months of age, all the way up to kids as old as 10. And some kids fed on just a single food every day. Some kids fed on 2 foods every day. And some kids fed on different levels of 10 different foods every day. She basically went to Whole Foods, dehydrated fish, made a little powder, made a concoction of fish and nut and egg and soy and mixed it all together. And then after a year, she drew blood in all those children and found that the kids that ate 10 different foods every day had a much ramped up tolerance. Basically, they had seen these foods by their immune system. Didn't matter if it was just 30 milligrams of these foods, a little teeny bit, like a little eighth of a peanut every day, or even a greater amount. And what she determined was she could put all these foods in a very small amount into a baby's diet every day, get all those different proteins in from tree nuts, from peanut, from fish, from shellfish. And by doing that every single day, tone down the immune system and stave off the development of an allergic condition like a food allergy that way. So Spoonful One was basically created by all of that research by food scientists. It's basically this tiny little pack that you can sprinkle in to your baby's food. So let's say you're starting with avocado, and then you do peach, and then you do a little ground turkey because you want to get iron in. Then you just would sprinkle in Spoonful One every day, 16 different foods that cause the most common allergens. And it's the parts of the food, the protein, that the immune system needs to see. So when the food researchers were determining and making the formulation of SpoonfulONE, they wanted to do a couple of things that Dr. Nadeau taught them. They wanted to make sure that the protein was intact so that the immune system would see it. And they wanted to make sure they were getting rid of the excess parts of the food that would fill up baby's tummy. Babies don't, in the beginning, as you'll see, some babies are like hoovers, and they want to have, solid foods 2 or 3 times a day. And some babies are a little bit slower. Some babies will start eating solids at 5 months, but they really aren't that interested one day. And then mom tries it the next day. Oh, they're not that interested. And then one day they eat a little bit, but they take their time to eat more than, solids, for example, 1 or 2 times a day. So SpoonfulONE got rid of even some of the fats and some of the excess fibers in these foods and kept the relevant protein. So it's basically checked, of course, for heavy metals. You guys have probably heard about all the news. We always have exceeded, for example, any of the heavy metals. It's basically cooked at a high temperature to make sure there's no contamination from any infectious stuff like bacteria or contaminants. And then it's checked for that protein integrity to make sure everything's there. And SpoonfulONE is designed just on an everyday basis to say, okay, whatever your baby's eating, if it's a good eating day or a bad eating day, you sprinkle SpoonfulONE into one of those feeds during a daily basis or into a bottle with a pretty high flow nipple, because it doesn't dissolve, but you could shake it up in that bottle and then you can feed it in a bottle if you like. But you feed it on a daily basis, ideally for about a year, just like the research showed. And basically, SpoonfulONE is designed to grow with your baby. So products, of course, when you start with a baby, you just sprinkle this tiny amount of powder that includes the 16 different foods. And then as your baby gets older, SpoonfulONE is designed to grow up with your baby, in that we don't want you to just introduce foods and stop. We want to keep all these foods and all these proteins in a baby's diet for quite some time. So after your baby's 6 months, you can buy a packet of puffs every day. This has the exact same amount of 16 foods as this little packet does, but it's actually designed just for an age appropriate for a child to self-feed when they're 6 months. And then we also have crackers for babies when they're kind of 12 months and up, or toddlers when they're 12 months up. The goal is just diversify your diet. Get as many different foods in your baby's diet every single day. And SpoonfulONE's kind of an insurance plan where you're making sure you're getting them in a precise amount that's really designed to be safe in a large population. We've distributed and sold now over 1 million servings of SpoonfulONE. We have 4,000 pediatricians who are in our network. We have thousands of pediatricians who are talking with parents and families about it. So you can always talk with your pediatrician about it. To learn more about how we make convenient getting all these different foods in early in life, the research to develop SpoonfulONE, and then studies that we've done afterwards. So we did studies with Northwestern University where they evaluated how easy it was to feed this at home and looked at any reactions that babies had, and babies did not have any reactions to SpoonfulONE. You can talk to your pediatrician about any of that. In addition, all this data is on spoonfulone.com. So it's just spoonfulone.com. You can read about my background. You can read about Dr. Nadeau's background, about the data that came out of Stanford to develop the product, and then the studies that we've been doing thereafter. Further, we're doing a study with Duke University. We're launching it in likely the next month, where we'll be studying babies eating SpoonfulONE for 18 months and interviewing parents on smartphones all throughout the study on how easy it is to get these foods in, how they're bringing all these foods to the table, because we want parents to feel great freedom of getting any of these foods in early in a baby's life and then keeping them in that baby's life really routinely over time. So I'm kind of done with my spiel. I maybe will just look at a couple of these questions here, and folks are asking. Thank you so much. Stacy's here from SpoonfulONE, who works with me at the company, answering a lot of your questions. And age range. One thing I'd love to talk about. We really target. We're saying to moms and dads, get this started at 4 to 6 months of age. But I have to tell you, even a study that was published just this morning and highlighted on CNN from one of our advisors, Dr. Ruchi Gupta, is even talking about food allergies can develop at any time in a person's life. In fact, half of food allergies are developed in adulthood. Part of that, we think, is just this modern environment that we overuse antibiotics, that we're breaking down our skin with even like detergents that we use, so that we have kind of micro tears in our skin, and we're getting introduced to things through our skin rather than through our tummies. And so keeping a diverse diet in your life is important for any of us. We want you to start with babies at 4 to 6 months because we don't want you to wait to get those foods in. That being said, if your baby's 12 months old, of course, it still makes sense to start getting all this different food diversity and different proteins into your baby's diet every single day. I mean, the hard thing about toddlerhood is that, like, one day they love something, the next day they don't. You know, like it can be very undulating. It can be very frustrating. So SpoonfulONE is, of course, designed to kind of shadow and go through that. But it's never too late to eat. My kids are 12 and 14 now. They eat SpoonfulONE. I eat SpoonfulONE here and there. I mean, we eat a really diverse diet, so I don't even think it's necessary. But I think in that early time in life when it's hard to get all of these different foods in, when a baby's not hungry for that many foods, and when the foods that are at the grocery or the foods that are at the big store don't have a lot of them, and if you're making your own baby food, you know, it can be a challenge that way. So first and foremost, I just want you to feel free to eat all these foods, to put them in your baby's diet, and to certainly just enjoy it, and know that SpoonfulONE is designed to just make it super convenient for you to do so. Future in the time span of life that's most beneficial. So, you know, I don't think, to be very honest, you know, the studies that have looked at early introduction of different common foods in a baby's life have spanned about 3 months of age to, as I told you, up to kindergarten. Nobody knows exactly where's the most beneficial time in life. Is it 4 to 6 months of age? Is it 12 months of age? Is it 2 years of age? But what we do know is that kids develop food allergies, right, all throughout infancy and toddlerhood when they're first starting those foods. And they've likely been exposed to them in the environment, particularly if they have open skin. So if your baby's got eczema, your pediatrician will guide you to get foods in early so that the tummy is learning about those foods. There would be no sense in waiting if your skin is open in your baby's body. So you want to be really good about making sure that all these different foods get into your baby's body and get into them regularly. And the earlier you do it, the better. But it's never going to be too late to do that. Someone's asking about the lifespan of the pack. So I'm going to let Stacey talk about that. Do any of these allergic foods come through bowel? Yeah, great question. So without a doubt, everything you eat, kind of amazingly, right? The proteins get broken down and they do get expressed in breast milk. However, when you look at the different protein content and the volume of protein content that comes from common allergens, like peanut, for example, one of our advisors, Dr. Karina Venter, who is a PhD nutritionist and lactation expert, has even studied how much of those foods are coming through breast milk. They're there, but not likely in as powerful a way that they're presenting to the immune system as when babies start eating these foods on their own. So breastfeeding is great. Breastfeeding is allowing incredible exposure to the diversity of foods that mom is eating. But we know, unfortunately, when you look at the data, if you look at just breastfed babies versus formula-fed babies, is there a protective effect to that breast milk? Unfortunately, there isn't, that we know of. And so, you know, what we want to know is, of course, when you start those solid foods and you have control over it, you can really improve how that baby gets exposed to those. So let me just see. Direct consumption gives them. Thanks, you guys. Do you have ones with dairy or fish your parents raising? Oh, yeah. Great question. So, you know, a lot of people will ask us about a kosher formula, or they'll ask us about a vegetarian or even a vegan. And we don't have that. And there's a couple of different reasons why. We you know, Dr. Nadeau believes wholeheartedly it's important to get these foods in early in life, and that actually the delay of that actually would cause risk. So a lot of families that we've worked with, for example, they may be vegetarian, but they'll make an exception for SpoonfulONE to train that baby's immune system to get all those different foods in that baby's body and in their diet that way. We have had kosher families, for example, who eat strict kosher, have their rabbi give special permission for SpoonfulONE as well, even though it has shellfish in it, for example. And so, you know, it's a kind of, unfortunately, we don't have different formulas because philosophically, Dr. Nadeau, when you look at that research, part of it was feeding all these different foods together and feeding a comprehensive amount of these different proteins in that way. And so, you know, we at this time haven't done that, but we certainly, it's kind of on the roadmap. But, you know, at this point, we are just working so hard to have pediatricians understand how to help families make sure, based on the USDA guidelines now, that we are getting all these foods in early in life, getting a really diverse diet. And SpoonfulONE is designed to just make that kind of more convenient with all of them that way. Let me just see. Yeah, so really, it's nice. So have you looked at a study that had no with introducing foods and salads early? So, you know, we do know, for example, there's been lots of data published in Pediatrics. The Journal for the American Academy of Pediatrics has been published that has looked at, you know, solid food introduction before 4 months can increase the risk of overweight and or obesity. So we never recommend early solid food introduction. In fact, that's what we're saying with Spoonful One. It's really up to you and baby when you start. But when you start solid foods, we want you to make sure you have great diet diversity and that you're not waiting on common allergens. And you can use Spoonful One every day, but then you can bring fish into your baby's diet. You can bring eggs into the baby's diet. You can bring dairy products into baby's diet. A study out of Japan, for example, just published in the last year, found that just 10 milliliters or 10 cc's of cow's milk formula in that early time of life between age 1 and 3 months was really protective for babies against even cow's milk protein allergies. So we know all this food diversity early in a baby's life is important. But to the point of the questioner, you don't want to have a lot of solids before 4 months. Breast milk is best. And obviously, that's what we want you to have is the exclusive single food early in life and or formula otherwise. So so 16 different food proteins. Thanks for having me, you guys. And you can read more at SpoonfulOne.com if you need it. But have a great day, have a great event, and good luck with your babies. Enjoy this amazing time in your life.